Suggestions from the public to shape how Singapore builds its future and chart the way we commute may come to fruition from as early as next year. In an extensive interview with CNA, New Rong Wei speaks with two of the ministers leading the build pillar under the Forward Singapore exercise on plans to keep housing and transport affordable, connected and inclusive.
Let's begin the conversation with a question for Minister Desmond.
Yeah.
Now, firstly, I understand you recently had a national youth dialogue, and one of the key concerns raised by youths was the affordability of public housing. Now, I'm turning 27 this year, and my generation is quite concerned about this. So what is your ministry doing to ensure that my generation can actually afford public housing in the years to come?
We've been working on a few key priorities. The first, of course, is to keep BTO prices affordable. We've been ramping up BTO supply, 100,000 flats between 2021 to 2025. We've recently reallocated and reprioritized housing so that the vast majority of BTO flats are kept aside for first-timers who are buying their first home. We've been managing construction delays because of the impact of COVID-19 and ensure that we can deliver homes to people who've been waiting for their keys, but ensuring that we don't compromise safety and quality of the BTO flats. HDB flats cater to 80% of Singaporean households, and that means that we provide housing to a very wide range of households with a wide range of incomes and budgets. And each year, as part of our BTO launch, we ensure affordable housing for that whole range, the whole spectrum of income types and budgets. Many households use less than a quarter of their monthly income to pay for their BTO flat, and many of them don't use cash, they use CPF.
So public transport is also getting more expensive, with fare hikes expected to kick in by the end of this year. Minister Iswaran, how do you expect for us to keep the public transport system affordable against escalating costs and ensure that this system remains sustainable in the long run?
So it's useful to start with the facts. The first thing to note is over the last 10 years or so, the cost of public transport has been rising at about 7% a year. And if you look at our public transport fares over the same period, they've been rising at about 1%. So there's a gap. But the more important question is, why is the cost going up? And there's a few reasons for that. One of them is the infrastructure that we are building and that we have to maintain. A second is manpower. We know wages have been rising and continues to rise. And the third is energy costs, which again we know has been going up. I think one of the key things is, of course, starting with a clear understanding of how we think costs of public transport should be managed and balanced between the commuters and the taxpayer. The second is, within the present generation of commuters, what is an equitable distribution of the load of the costs? In other words, for example, those who are actively employed versus those who may be retired or those with other special needs and so on. And the third is, whatever we do in terms of costs, we have to also bear in mind that it's also an intergenerational decision. So what we don't pay today and defer to the future basically means we are borrowing on the account of future generations of Singaporeans. But there's another very important aspect to the work that we are doing. All the procurement decisions we make in terms of what the public transport operators are doing, in terms of rendering their service, the cost and the productivity factors that go into it, these are things that we watch very closely to make sure we're able to extract as much value as possible for the benefit of both commuters and taxpayers. And the other important piece in this is also overall rationalizing our public transport system so that where there may be duplications, where there is scope to make savings, we also do that.
Minister Lee, the pandemic has affected our lifestyles tremendously. In your recent public engagements, what have the public actually shared about these changing trends, and how do you think this would actually affect future development plans?
Singaporeans over the last 2 years have embraced, out of necessity, work from home and work away from office. And that has got us to think deeply about the concept of office space. It gives us a renewed vigor in our polycentric approach to put a central business district, not just in town, but in Jurong Gateway and in other parts of Singapore, to make commutes shorter, to make work closer to home. But we're even looking at the whole concept of home. HDB flats typically 3-room, 4-room, 5-room, they come with specific configurations, number of rooms, kitchen, living room, toilet facilities. But having conversations with Singaporeans, especially over the last 2 years, we are beginning to think of new ways in which we can create flexibility for Singaporeans. For example, by having a few options for them to configure their home, to choose from, or even having an open plan flat. We provide you the floor space and you can customize based on your need. For example, you may need a space for work, you may not need so many rooms, you may want to have a more open concept. That ensures that our public housing remains responsive to people's aspirations.
So, Minister Iswaran, much has been done to ensure that the public transport system is accessible to all, including the elderly, persons with disabilities, as well as young families. How much further can we go to ensure that our public transport system remains inclusive to all?
I think even as we acknowledge that our public transport system has come very far, there is a desire for a more inclusive one. This again is an area where we can actually foster the gracious side of commuting, because often it's not just what is available through the infrastructure or the facilities, but it's the help you get, whether it's from the people working in public transport who are already sensitized to this, are looking out for the needs and catering to it, but also fellow commuters coming to help. I think all of us have experienced it where, all you need is one pleasant smile, one helping hand, and it makes a world of difference to your day.
What are you hoping to accomplish from this Forward Singapore exercise?
And it's been very encouraging so far in the conversations we've had on Forward SG, of how people have not just focused on their own needs, but have advocated for the concerns of other groups as well. Ultimately, we want to recognize the evolving society that we see. Our birth rates may be low, but our households are getting smaller. There are more nuclear families rather than 3-generation families. We have more Singaporeans who are single and who need housing as well. We have more seniors who live alone when their children have flown the coop and who are looking for housing that meets their needs. And so the social compact will have to evolve to meet these changing demographics and aspirations.
The next 10 years, we're going to see major changes in the urban mobility landscape in Singapore. Our MRT system is going to increase by 50%. We're going to see significant electrification in public transport and also in private transport. We're going to see a lot more active mobility solutions around cycling, around pedestrian walkways and so on. So it is an opportunity for all of us to come together and ask not just what we want, but also what we are prepared to do to realize a vision of this transport system for the future.